Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the final regular season week number 7 of the VGC Draft League. I hope you've been enjoying yourselves as much as I have with watching these replays as we come to bring things to a close. Now, with my match concluding already, that actually locks in the top 4 slots for playoffs, so everything played from here on out is mainly for seeding. We're going to kick things off with the fight for first place with Darkbadger versus Ryu. Couldn't ask for a better final match than number 1 and number 2 up against each other. And this particular matchup, I think, is going to be a little bit volatile. Obviously, we have Ryu just been steamrolling everyone with the Rain Squad, plus Dragonite, plus the power spot from Stonjourner. But they may have to slow their roll a little bit versus Darkbadger. The presence of Rotom Mow, that means that Rotom Wash can't freely do what it would like to do, which is come in and counter the Kingambit and the Volcarona. To be honest, it has to watch out a little bit for the Volcarona too, because it's been known to use something like Terra Grass, or even go Terra Water, and fire back with a Giga Drain. So the water Pokemon can't come in as freely as they normally would. Ryu may have to think around that a little bit. On top of that, the Dragonite has to deal with the Kingambit now. I don't think it's had as tough as a matchup as versus Kingambit. Obviously it has access to things like Earthquake. I believe Low Kick. I have to double check on that one. Didn't think about that before starting to record this, but with Kingambit's higher defense, with a well-placed Terra, it's going to be much harder for Dragonite to remove that Pokemon from the field than some of their previous opponents. However, with the power spot from Stonjourner, that may help to make up the difference just a little bit. You also have access to the Salazzle. Just use that overheat to try and chip out the Kingambit, even if it does Terra. And then we've seen the eject pack tech before, so that'll be your free exit out to pivot into another defensive tool. On Darkbadger's side, though, they did pick up recently Mimikyu and Clawitzer. Clawitzer, while not like a really bulky Pokemon, we have seen the Mimikyu does have access to things like Trick Room, so you can use that to underspeed the opponent, and then Clawitzer can try and pop off from there. If they do end up bringing Pelipper on Ryu's side, Clawitzer then gets a boost to its Water Pulse as well to do some devastating damage on the opposite end as well. So I don't think it's a clear-cut path to victory for either team. I think they each have a lot of defensive tools and offensive tools that could at any moment skew the battle in their way. So let's go ahead and take it to the replays to see what goes down. Game number 1, and already we see some of the more unique picks on the field. For Darkbadger's side, we do see the Clawitzer come out, as long as the Rotom Mow, Kingambit, Mimikyu, the Morgrem, and the Volcarona. Ryu has opted for Dragonite, Fortress of all things, Gardevoir, Salazzle, Tinkaton, and Stonjourner. So here we go. Pokeballs are flying out onto the field, and leading off for Darkbadger is Clawitzer and Mimikyu. We just talked about it. Fortress and Salazzle leading on Ryu's side. Clawitzer's coming with a Protect to check out what Ryu's going to do in his first turn. Correctly does so against the Fake Out. Rock Slide coming out from the Fortress to get some chip damage and bust the Disguise from Mimikyu's side. Alright, and we're going to set the Trick Room here. Again, we just talked about this. The Salazzle is going to pivot out into the Dragonite, while the Rock Slide coming out from the Fortress is going to be the slowest mon on the field for right now, and gets a flinch onto the Clawitzer, probably crucially, as the Mimikyu sets up a Sword Stance here. Dragon type Terra on the Clawitzer, answered by Terra Steel on the Dragonite. Not sure if they predicted that, but the Shadow Sneak coming in from the Mimikyu into the Dragonite busts the Multiscale if it has it. Rock Slide coming in from the Fortress, but doesn't get the flinch this time, crucially. Dragon Pulse aimed into the Dragonite, but only chipped down due to the Terra Steel, and fires back with Iron Head into the Mimikyu to finish it off. Kingambit coming in here to put some pressure down. The Dragonite's going to pivot out into the Gardevoir very bravely. Earthquake gonna hit both sides, do some chip damage, but not the Gardevoir with Telepathy. Brick Break aimed into the Gardevoir, meant for the Terra Steel Dragonite, while Water Pulse goes into the Fortress, not at 50% health, pretty close. Gonna switch back out into the Salazzle with the final turn of Trick Room. That's gonna help set up the Fake Out, very crucially here, so we can get some breathing room. The flinch onto the Clawitzer from another rock slide just as the turn ends, and Ironhead into the Salazzle just to do chip damage. One more protect from the Clawitzer, and a Sucker Punch into the Salazzle for the clean KO there. Earthquake, gonna do some more damage. Critical hit on Kingambit, probably crucial there. Both Pokemon on life support now as Gardevoir comes in to try and clean up. We'll switch out the Kingambit into the Volcarona. Moonblast finishes off the Clawitzer finally. Meanwhile, another Earthquake, gonna get a little bit of chip, 34%, not bad, into the Volcarona as the Kingambit swings back in. Moonblast to finish off the Kingambit. Not sure if it was choice lock and just wanted to get out of that Sucker Punch, but it goes down to that Moonblast while the Volcarona fires back with Flamethrower into the Fortress. Now it's down to the Dragonite and Gardevoir versus the Volcarona. Extreme Speed, taking it pretty low there. Shirley's going to be finished off by the Moonblast. No, takes it down to 8% health, but it's still a 2v1. A fight uphill. Flamethrower takes out the Dragonite, but it's only a matter of time before the Gardevoir finishes this game off, and it does with another Moonblast. Like immediately we can kind of see, the strategies all we're just going all out with these strategies here. Leading off with the Trick Room, trying to find that that speed angle to kind of overwhelm Ryu. Didn't really pay off. The Mimikyu just fell too early. Couldn't put enough damage onto the field even after that Swords Dance. Meanwhile, Dragonite just got away scot-free thanks to that Terra Steel and the Iron Head. Moving on to game number 2. Alright, flying onto the field now is Kingambit and Volcarona, the stars of Darkbadger's team, facing off against Salazzle and Stonejourner this time. Gonna Terra Water the Kingambit to lead things off here. Overheat was aimed into it, but misses, unfortunate. Rock Slide from the Stonejourner, very fast or very slow, very fast Stonejourner, slow Volcarona, but the Rock Slide finishes off the Volcarona very quickly. Meanwhile, Stone Edge from the Kingambit finishes off the Salazzle here. Looking at a 3v3 cleanly, though Terra is spent on Darkbadger's side. Gardevoir and Rotom come in here now. We see a Terra Dragon from the Stonejourner. Moonblast aimed into the Kingambit, doesn't get the KO there. Rock Slide to follow up, and that doesn't clean up the KO there either. 1% left on the Kingambit. A Leaf Storm aimed into the Stonejourner and even resisted. Its special defense is just way too weak and it goes down immediately. Followed up by the Iron Head into the Gardevoir. This was a very crucial turn. 1 more percent and maybe they can salvage a 2v2 in the endgame. Extreme Speed coming out from the Dragonite, who's left to fend on its own, finishes off the Kingambit, but now they have to deal with the Rotom. Thunderbolt to clean off the multi-scale, but we have the Clawitzer in the back, and we've already seen Dragon Pulse. That's probably going to take the KO very easily. Thunderbolt, get more damage down, followed up by the Dragon Pulse. 2-hit KO very easily there. Very quick game, and shows just how much the momentum can swing in one direction if KOs aren't taken very quickly here. A little bit unfortunate with the overheat miss from the Salazzle into the Kingambit. You got to imagine you get that extra little bit of chip damage when that Rock Slide comes down. It actually finishes off Kingambit, and the final turns look a little bit differently though. But with that, Darkbadger moves on into game number 3. Alright, one more time, we're sending Pokeballs off into the field, and it's Morgrem plus Kingambit facing off against Dragonite and Stonejourner, the power champions of that team. Fake Out into the Dragonite, that's going to clear off the multi-scale, doesn't have that anymore. Meanwhile, the Earthquake from the Stonejourner does half of Kingambit's life, probably crucially there, so pretty big damage. Stone Edge, meanwhile, from the Kingambit is going to hit the Dragonite, doesn't finish it off though. Dragonite's going to make a hasty retreat into the Gardevoir while Kingambit switches out into the Rotom. Reflect from the Morgrem, it's going to help it take those Earthquakes or Rock Slides pretty cleanly, but the Heavy Slam is the unexpected move that clears out the Morgrem from the Stonejourner. Clawitzer comes in, try to put some pressure and some damage onto the field. The Stonejourner protects this time, seeing what Rotom did to it last time, and so does the Clawitzer, just in case. Moonblast from the Gardevoir recognizes the Rotom as a threat and wants to clear that off the field. The Rotom Leaf Storms into the Gardevoir, doing a good amount of damage, and clears off a special attack drop with the White Herb. The Stonejourner is going to switch out into the Dragonite as the Rotom protects, and the Moonblast was headed its way, so it protects very carefully there, and the Water Pulse from the Clawitzer finishes off the threat of Gardevoir from the field. It doesn't make KOing quickly as easy anymore, except the Stonejourner we know is fast, so it could Rock Slide for a KO possibly. Protect from the Stonejourner though, just to make sure, and Extreme Speed actually finishes off the Rotom boosted by that Power Spot. Water Pulse was aimed for the Stoneturner, but finds its Protect. Kingambit is coming in to try and salvage this game. Terra Waters immediately, probably expecting an Earthquake there, but the Extreme Speed comes out instead. And Rock Slide, another critical hit we see onto the Kingambit. Not sure if that would have KO'd otherwise. It's hard to tell. And the Clawitzer gets flinched in the same process. Extreme Speed into the Clawitzer, followed up by a Rock Slide, which does connect and KOs the Clawitzer very crucially in these last turns. It was a 2v2, and you gotta imagine either that crit or that flinch changes the dynamic of the matchup. If the flinch doesn't happen, probably the Stoneturner goes down, and then the follow-up on the following turn, Dragon Knight may not have enough juice in the tank to KO the Clawitzer, and instead the Clawitzer finalizes things with the Dragon Pulse. But a little bit of luck going in Darkbadger's, in Ryu's way, and they improve it to a 6-1 record to finalize the #1 seed at the end of week 7. That being said, Darkbadger is still in #2 seed, can't move from that spot based on the other records. So congrats to both players, but in particular, congrats to Ryu for winning this particular matchup. Circling back around after an exciting match, we can kind of see some of the things that we talked about, where because of the presence of something like Rotom Mow, there's not a ton of incentive to bring the Rotom Wash, which can make defending against the Kingambit and the Volcarona a little bit difficult here. I think one of the things to call out though, Darkbadger did go for a Trick Room strategy with the Mimikyu, and as a result ends up running a lot slower of a Volcarona than we typically see, and that allowed the Stoneturner, which I'm imagining is still just running a little bit faster than you would probably expect, allows it to KO the Volcarona. So the threat of that pressure means that Darkbadger is typically out one tool if they can't set up that Trick Room very safely. A facet to probably kind of use is the Morgrim with the screens to help set up some defenses for either strategy, whether that's a Trick Room or whether that's just a Volcarona out in a normal speed setting. Having a defense boost with the Quiver Dance may have done some good. It's really kind of hard to tell because you are probably also having to spend your Terra at the same time to make sure you insulate yourself. You know what I mean? But yeah, like overall, it was a pretty fun match to watch. A lot of offensive tools coming out, kind of pairing well with some of the defensive tools. A lot of back and forth. We saw how volatile the second game actually was, just a little bit more percentage off, and things change very, very quickly. But again, congrats to Ryu for winning this matchup. The next matchup we have is KeystoneRecords versus TreeDolphin. And like I mentioned before, the playoff slots are locked with KeystoneRecords currently in the 3rd seed. However, if they don't win this game, they actually fall below to the 4th seed. So they're kind of hoping to win this one to get a better matchup, potentially into the playoffs there. But for now, they have to deal with this matchup. And while normally I like to praise KeystoneRecords' team for just the variety of bulky Pokemon that they do have, that makes pivoting into matchups and responding a little bit easier than you would expect. I think there's kind of a disparity when it comes to versus TreeDolphin's team, who tries to find initiative in a lot of ways. They can set up the Trick Room through the Spiritomb and the Sableye and try to win out from there. They can play very heavy offensive in the early game, and then we've seen where they come back with the Rapska for the Revival Blessing that they like so much, with the Lepid Berry to use it twice actually. We've seen where you have the early game with Palafin, the late game with the Palafin Hero form. We've seen things like Anger Point activated by Flower Trick. So I think where the issue is going to lie is that KeystoneRecords' team doesn't have a lot of way to be proactive. That's the word that I'm looking for. A lot of the Pokemon are built to be a response to certain threats, and then just try and fire back with a bulky offense, if that makes sense. So they'll have to find a way to defend appropriately against TreeDolphin's options. So I kind of want to give the matchup to KeystoneRecords for the Pokemon alone, but just on the way that I'm thinking about the flow of battle, TreeDolphin may just have an edge player to player as a result. But let's see how the events of these matches unfold. All right, for this week, Keystone Records has selected Clodsire, Skeledirge, Garganical, Ampharos, Corviknight, and Umbreon. TreeDolphin has opted for Meowscarada, Toadscool, Primeape, Palafin, Bisharp, and a newcomer that we haven't had a chance to talk about is Cyclozar. So let's get into the actual gameplay. Leading off for Keystone Records is Garganical and Ampharos, opposing the Palafin and Bisharp, curiously enough. Palafin's going to swap out and activate that hero form while Primeape comes in to take its place. Garganical's going to switch out the same into the Clodsire, who takes a guillotine for a one-hit knockout on the first turn of the last set for... Oh my goodness, I'm gonna lose my mind. Garganical comes in to see what it can do here. It tears into grass. That's not gonna save it from a guillotine if it lands though. Meanwhile, Brick Break from the Ampharos is gonna destroy that Reflect that it just set up the previous turn, while Ampharos sets off a Dazzling Gleam. Does only a little bit of chip damage, not too much however. Iron Defense coming from a Garganical does not save it from the guillotine. They're 2 for 3 in the first 3 turns of this game. Close Combat, meanwhile, going to come out and takes Ampharos down to life support while it sets up another Reflect, not afraid of that Brick Break there. And then Umbreon, while it's my favorite Pokemon, it's got a big hill to climb up. Hopefully it doesn't get hit by the guillotine either. It goes into the Ampharos, which misses, but the Brick Break, of course, does not and fences off the Ampharos. Thunderwave going to come out from the Umbreon into the Bisharp, hopefully hold it back for a little bit, but Close Combat is going to take Umbreon down low. Imagine another one coming in is just going to clean up the game. Thunderwave into the Primeape does miss, so Primeape is free to just go ahead and Close Combat. Doesn't get the chance to, as Keystone Records goes ahead and forfeits the match. Not too much to say about that one. 2 for 4 on guillotines, just decimates the Keystone Records team. Doesn't even get a chance to play. Meanwhile, TreeDolphin gets to hide most of their strategies, just by that virtue alone. It's really hard for an Umbreon on the back end to really come back and do anything versus a Bisharp Primeape team. So we'll have to see what kind of adjustments Keystone Records has in game number 2. All right, hopefully everyone's got a chance to stop reeling back as we adjust for game number 2. Leading off is Garganical and Skeledirge from Keystone Records side, being very aware of that guillotine now with this ghost typing here. Meanwhile, Meowscarada and Primeape coming out from TreeDolphin. The Garganical is going to switch out into the Corviknight here. Meanwhile, the Flower Trick into Terra Poison Primeape is going to activate the Anger Point. Rage Fist into the Skeledirge, doesn't care about the Anger Point due to Unaware, so it only takes 44% damage as a result. Heat Wave goes into both Pokemon, doesn't KO the Meowscarada crucially. Meanwhile, the Dark Pulse special attack option goes into Skeledirge, finishes it off, and the boosted Brick Break from Primeape is going to finish off the Corviknight. Still, we're kind of in the same spot as the last game where Pokemon are dropping quickly, and now it's up to Umbreon and the Garganical in the end game. But versus a special Meowscarada, Energy Ball into the Garganical takes it low, and a boosted Primeape from the Anger Point hits the Umbreon with the Brick Break, but the Terra Poison saves it. Meanwhile, Foul Play turns the Anger Point boost on its head and KOs the Primeape there. Toadscool comes in at the very end of the game with the Rage Powder, trying to save the Meowscarada so it can attack freely. Energy Ball is going to finish off the Garganical, and once again we're here with Umbreon on its lonesome, trying to find its way back versus 3 Pokemon here, but with a Rage Powder Toadscool, it is hard pressed to do so. Leech Seed goes into the Umbreon, and it's just not able to touch this Meowscarada, especially as it used a turn to try and heal up with the Moonlight. The only turn it could have possibly tried to hit the Meowscarada when it did, the Toadscool didn't Rage Powder. Again, we're going to see the Dark Pulse come out while a Spore comes out from the Toadscool, fully disabling the Umbreon, and that's it. Keystone Records can't move forward from there and goes ahead and forfeits the game there. So very dominating performance from TreeDolphin. Nothing to say about the really the first game of the match where one-hit KOs just everywhere from the guillotine. Here in game 2 though, they found a really strong angle to get some heavy offense and lead into the same situation, but with the Anger Point Primeape and the option for Energy Ball. A special attack Meowscarada helps versus the Garganical. No matter how many Iron Defenses that thing gets to set up, it gets to bypass that with the Energy Ball, which looked honestly looked boosted from perhaps an Overgrow ability. So that's something to keep in mind. And with Umbreon still in the back trying to salvage the end game, it just doesn't have the offensive offensive capabilities to really come back against this, especially with nothing like taunt to stop the Toad School. So it's just really stuck. Very clean games from TreeDolphin. So congratulations for them. Keystone Records, however, while still locked into playoffs, does fall into the 4th seed as a result of this match. So with this matchup, it kind of leads back to what we said before the matchup started. One of the kind of battle flow obstacles that Keystone Records has to kind of get over is that their team doesn't have a lot of proactive, has to play reactive, and with TreeDolphin's team having so many proactive options, they have to find just the right answer to deal with all of them. And TreeDolphin's team can be pretty unpredictable with the options it has at sometimes, making that a very difficult battle to kind of overcome for them, I believe. Say nothing about the the first match where the unexpected option of guillotine comes through. For that, all you really have are your ghost types, Skeledirge and Banette. But Masquerada covers that with its own dark move, so it's really hard to call that, right? You'd have to be thinking really big brain, like what if they just bring the only Pokemon that has the one-hit KO move on it? Maybe if I go sturdy on Garganacl, that helps, but then you also have to factor in Sableye and Spiritomb having access to Will-O-Wisp. You kind of want to retain the Purifying Salt in case of that. Though, in retrospect, you don't really care about the burns. You're just going body press, you're going iron defense, you're going salt cure. Once you match up versus those two Pokemon, you're not worried about hitting the body press, just the salt cure, and then you get to recover any damage taken from the burn. So, but yeah, that'd have to be a really heavy read to think that they're gonna go for Guillotine Bisharp. So I can't hold that against them at all. But yeah, they just had a tough time hanging on, even in the second game where the one-hit KO moves were just not present, and it just left it up to the Umbreon in the end game, which can't quite easily overcome something like a Primeape. I think they got a little bit of breathing room that one turn with the Foul Play versus the Anger Point boosted Primeape, but other than that, you're not really at a good matchup versus the Bisharp, or versus really the Masquerada at all. I would honestly like to have seen something like Taunt, so you match up better into the Sableye, into Spiritomb and Toad School. That still doesn't solve the issue of the heavy offense on the front end of the game. For that, I kind of did want to see where something like Corviknight leading could threaten both the Masquerada and the Primeape, from turn 1. You would have to build a little bit bulkier so you don't fall immediately to something like +6 Brick Break there, or have like a good Terra. And that's only if you're expecting the boost from Primeape, which you may not be. So that would be fair. It's hard to bring the Tauros in because of Masquerada and the potential of Defiant on Primeape, but I think a lot of offense was actually missing from the team with the lack of something like Tauros. You do have Skeledirge for some offense as well, but even it had trouble getting going. Again, because we saw the Masquerada with the Dark Pulse taking advantage of Skeledirge's lower special defense stat. It was just really hard for Keystone Records to legitimately find a position versus this kind of lineup. So again, kudos for TreeDolphin for great prep into this matchup. Honestly, just a little bit of a mismatch based on the general goals of each team. The final matchup that we're going to go through for this end of season is Whatshamidt versus Eltrim. Now, unfortunately, this one won't actually play out due to availability constraints, so Eltrim will receive the win for this week. The week hasn't officially closed though, so if anything does change, if the battle comes out, then of course we'll do another replay review following shortly after that. In the meantime though, I thought it would still be kind of fun to try and break down the team and what I think the matchup may look like. And I gotta give, from my perspective, a bit of an advantage over to Eltrim. I know each week we kind of hyper focus on the Dondozo Tatsugiri. It's just something that you really can't ignore. And normally teams will have like these really quirky options in order to deal with the Dondozo, or just an option that not everybody, that's pretty unique, right? So like with TreeDolphin's team, you have the Masquerada, and kind of blow past the Dondozo through the use of Flower Trick if it needs to. Some teams have the option for like skill swap to get the unaware ability off of it. Even something like my squad, when I have the Gastrodon, I use a Terra Fairy with an air balloon so that I could nullify all 3 of Wave Crash, Order Up, and Earthquake when they brought that to the matchup. You can't really say the same thing for Whatchamidt's team though. There's not a lot of utility outside of the Amoonguss. There's no Trick Room. There's not like a good skill swap. I have to check and see if actually Glaceon actually gets it. But even then, that's not. It doesn't feel like the most amazing option to lead into this team. And then so past that, you kind of have to brute force your way through the matchup. And normally you can try and do that, usually through like a fast special attacker. But again, we see on Whatchamidt's team, they're kind of lacking that. Their heavy special offense is coming from the likes of Magnezone or adaptability from Dragalge. So like I think there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done by Amoonguss, which does give the team a little bit of breathing room, because normally Dondozo likes to go with Terra Grass to avoid something like the Spore, like the Rage Powder, because normally you're just trying to like Wave Crash everything and kill it. But it's disincentivized from going the Terra Grass because of the presence of Batcalibur, Tauros Fire version, Abomasnow, even Flamigo to an extent. Maybe it runs a Focus Sash, can use at least 1 Brave Bird before it goes down and do some significant damage over to the Dondozo. And of course Dragalge, if it finds a good Terra, those Sludge Bombs start to hurt if Dondozo goes for Terra Grass. So all these deterrents allow Amoonguss to actually do his job, put it to sleep, use the Rage Powder, possibly even opt for a Clear Smog actually. Normally, like, we also see Terra Steel is an option that players like to use just to protect from that Clear Smog. And you can kind of expect it from the Dondozo here too. Terra Steel doesn't look terrible into this team. Pretty much the only thing really threatening it there is the Tauros, the Fire Tauros, and the Batcalibur if it decided it wants to go like a Earthquake set, for example. I'm kind of expecting Terra Fire maybe, just to avoid the potential Will-O-Wisp from Tauros instead. A lot of different ways it can go, but the main point is it's not really trying to go Terra Grass if it can help it. And that leaves Amoonguss to actually do his job of sporing and Rage Powdering it, possibly giving Whatchamidt a chance to fight back. Now in turn though, the problem is now you can't really use Amoonguss in the early game versus the squad as a result if you're really trying to gear it up for that Dondozo matchup, because there's several things on Eltram's team that threaten it, that typically want to come out in the early game, like the Talonflame, even Taunt on Serena is a threat towards Amoonguss, the Espathra, for example. I think there's a lot of options for Eltram to really solidify this early game, and then come in on the back half with Dondozo Tatsugiri to actually clean up. So yeah, that's the most that I can really say about it. I think it's just a tough hill for Whatchamidt to climb. We've commented before how there are several ideas, several ways that can actually play the game and actually do a pretty solid job. It's just really hard to pilot around some of these teams with some of these options, especially with the shared weaknesses. Meanwhile, Eltram can just keep their plan pretty simple, even like with some of the more obvious options, and just kind of like blast their way through. So if they ever go blow for blow, I think Eltram just has the power and the bulk to actually just come out on top no matter what. And with all that out of the way, these are the final standings for group number 5 at the conclusion of week number 7. So Ryu, Darkbadger, myself, and KeystoneRecords are going into the playoffs following this week. Those standings are followed by TreeDolphin, Eltram, Coelectra, and Whatchamidt. So did want to take an opportunity to say thanks to everyone for playing in this regular season. I've said before, like, the draw to these draft leagues are just seeing kind of the quirky options, since we're using a lot of unique Pokemon that we normally wouldn't use, and also some unique options since we can kind of prepare for these matchups ahead of time to make for really unique battles, really fun battles. And so far, this group has not disappointed. So thank you for all that. It's actually been an entertaining time looking through all these replays. That being said, though, we're gonna go ahead and start prepping for the playoffs, looking through all other 15 groups right now just to see what's threatening, and then go from there. And of course, we'll continue our coverage, looking at the group number 5 players in there, at least in the first round of the playoffs. And we're doing replay reviews there as normal. We'll see what we want to do as far as covering the other players too, because I kind of want to take a look at those, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Until then, though, if you do like this type of content from me, just leave a like and a comment. I appreciate it as usual, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.